So it's 8:15, it's July 11th, and I'd like to call the Whatcom PUD regular meeting to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's a 3-hour time difference.
Yes.
So let's move on to the approval of our agenda. Are there any modifications or changes to the agenda?
I just have one comment, and we don't necessarily need to make this change today, but I wanted to entertain the idea of moving the general manager report to earlier in the meeting, perhaps even before old business. I just have noticed that in a lot of our other meetings, we're crunched for time by the time we even get to the general manager report. And to me, that's one of the most important parts of the meeting, is hearing from Chris. And I would also want to consider the idea, and we don't necessarily have to have this in the agenda, but breaking it down by the key categories in our strategic plan, Chris. So customer service, water resources, broadband. And I think with broadband, you could just say, punting that to old business. But I just think every meeting having a consistent structure, so we touch on each kind of high umbrella category from the strategic plan, would be really helpful for me. So I don't know if we could just, like I said, it doesn't need to be today, but I'd love to consider that for our future meetings as a new structure for our agenda.
Well,
Great,
just
let's,
an observation. Just a practical observation. I do edit what I'm going to say on the fly based on how much time we have. So, there's a lot of times where there's things that I would tell you about, and it's just, it's nice to know we don't have time and move on.
And I would prefer to hear everything from Chris. And if we need to cut things off, I'll talk less in my commissioner report. But to me, hearing what's happening in these 2-week stretches in between our meetings, like, I want to get a download on what's happening. So should we just consider that for our next meeting or start it today?
Yeah, it's a good idea. I think that we should give Chris time to prepare for that.
Well, your general manager's report hasn't changed any, right? We can bump that up to.
No, and I've got something here that has kind of the outline of the strategic plan on it. I could use as a guide.
Okay.
So whatever you guys prefer.
Well, I would make a motion to move the general manager report to item 5. So right after public comment.
I'd second that.
I'm fine with that, yeah. Are you okay with that, Chris, for today?
Oh, I'm fine. It's your meeting. I'm here to help you guys.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure that you weren't on the spot. Okay. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. So the motion is to move the general manager's report, which is item number 7 at present, to be the new number 5, old business would be the new number 6, and new business would be the new number 7.
Aye.
Yeah. Aye, yeah.
Okay, aye. So
So now you're off to approval of the agenda as modified.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
Second.
motion is second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. So we've got 2 meeting minutes to approve and claims for July 11th today. Is there a
I'll
motion?
make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a
Commissioner
second.
Grant, you had questions about some of the consent agenda items. Were those satisfied?
I mean, I looked at the emails this morning. I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I had some questions about items, but they were answered, and it sounds like you guys are okay with the claims, so I'm okay moving
Yeah,
forward.
I also, just to be clear, I also had some questions, but I assume I would clear those up talking to Chris later, so.
And I would just urge you, if you have any questions about anything on the consent agenda, contact me, contact Annette, contact Brian. And we'll get you the answers, and then, make a decision. If you want to have a discussion of the item here, we can, or if your curiosity is fully satisfied and that's all it took, then, we're good.
So did we approve the consent agenda? Or
We didn't. all
I think there
vote
was a
yet.
motion. I don't know if there was a second.
I seconded it, but we haven't.
There's a
No
motion and a second, yeah.
Has not been a motion.
John,
There has
there-
not been a there's
John
been a
observed-
motion, a second, but not a vote.
okay.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and call for the vote then. There's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moving on in the agenda, the next item on our agenda is public comment. Are there folks in the room who have comment, and can someone help with online as well?
So
Go ahead,
Mike,
Mark.
could you come up to the microphone, introduce yourself?
Is there a camera on me, or can I sit down here and we'll? I prefer to. Huh?
Just be sure and identify yourself so we know who's.
Mike Kaufman, citizen of Whatcom County. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. And I'll try and make this short, but this is how I need to say it to get my point across. I'll title this a pep talk for the commissioners. This is directed at the commissioners, my conversation. I'd like to focus on one specific word, and that word is public, in the public PUD. And public and utility, I think that they're two entirely different words. We think of public, government, tourism, retail, and utility to me is it's business. It's the utility of delivering utilities, water, energy, communications. And you commissioners are public servants. You are one of the groups in this county, besides the county council, that are elected by the public. And but your position really, and your daily and how you work is focusing on industry. To me, it's not really directed at focusing on the public. And over the past 30 years, before O'Toole was elected, and now you two commissioners, the three commissioners that sat here were on the commissioners for, I believe, over 30 years. And it was my opinion that they took pride in doing nothing. I remember at O'Toole's campaign event with Commissioner Kenner made the statement, we can't do any green industry or renewables. We don't have any infrastructure. That was his opinion. And that was a statement he made in the campaign. And I feel that PUDs struggle across the nation, certainly here in Washington State, to deal with being public. What does that mean to be public? Skip over my story to try and make this, but I was in the tree care industry. Out of high school, they asked me to run Northern Ohio tree trimming when I got out of Ohio State. I declined on that offer, but I had history. And with that, I think it's important to say that it was an interaction between the public and the industry. I was working to clear trees on the public right of way for the industry And I had to ask the public to trim their trees. And I was good at it. And that's why they asked me to kind of run that at a very young age, I would say. And I'd like to consider the word public in 4 specific subject areas. 1, concerning Manager Chris. 2, your strategic plan. 3, the comprehensive plan of Whatcom County and your PSE study. And I'll put the punchline in here. I think you need to hire a new manager, personally speaking. I was at your meeting and at the yacht club when you picked the 3 different managers or the interview of the 3 finalists for the manager position. And, you know, to cut that one short, you picked Manager Chris for very specific reasons. And it is my opinion that he is an industry guy. That is who he is. That's his DNA. That's what he's learned in his professional life, and that's who he is. And I've had 4 encounters with Commissioner Chris in the time that was here. And each time it did not go well. And I've been involved in the PUD, this PUD in Whatcom County since 1989. And let's see. And others have spoken to me about that subject that I just mentioned. We'll start with the strategic plan, just basically you made suggestions in your while you were doing the strategic plan about engaging the public and how to go about doing this. I called Manager Chris to talk about it, lend a hand, because I've been involved with that through the last 35 years here with the PUD. And I asked in that also during your strategic plan to include one action item in your plan. And that action item was to consider and implement the comprehensive policies where possible. You're the public utility district. The utility chapter 5 of the comprehensive plan deals with utilities. Seems like you should be working with the comprehensive plan to me. But there's nothing in the comprehensive plan, in the strategic plan about that specific item. And so your strategic plan, me being the public, it really doesn't speak to me at all. Doesn't really mention me. It's all about, to me, the industry of running a utility. Just a slight bit of history. Back in 1989, Puget Sound Energy wanted to run a brand new high tension lead through the county. A public group was formed, NOPE, Neighbors Opposing Power Encroachment. The end result of that whole thing was we kicked the crap out of PSE. The public did. We won all 5 marbles sitting on the table in that action. It was the public's involvement that made that happen. In 1991, the comprehensive plan was passed in Washington legislature. It became law. The comprehensive plan is a public document. It gives meaning to the public's vision. It describes what the public wants, and it is measured in law. I'll give you a recent example. The franchise agreement with Cascade Gas was a 25-year franchise agreement. It was up in front of the county council last year. In one of the committees, we learned about and explored franchise agreements. To cut this one short, last year, the county council cut that 25-year franchise agreement down to 7 years based on language in the comprehensive plan that I helped write. We wrote, and that the comprehensive plan in 91, in the early 90s that we were involved with, it was the first utility chapter ever written in the country. It was the first one in Washington State. We led with that. And I think we should be doing it again.
Mike, let me just ask you, I recognize that you have lots of thoughts. If you could wrap it up, because I want to show respect to our, amount of time
Okay.
for public comment. So thank you.
So, two things to wrap it up. A year ago, Councilman Galloway introduced a resolution. Across the board, we are in a review of the comprehensive plan. There's lots of language in there that affects the PUD. I think the PUD commissioners should support, engage with Councilman Galloway and upgrade our comprehensive plan because it is woefully behind in the reality of events and utilities and the actions that you're taking. And it would be dereliction to me if the PUD does not follow up with Councilman Galloway on the resolution and being involved in the rewriting of the comprehensive plan. And your strategic PSE or the PSE study that you did, I was there. Yeah, okay. It seemed like a dubious exercise to me, but we learned three things. It's too expensive for you, the PUD, to purchase PSE or to do that route, to buy the power. But what it did say, kind of an after discussion, was that the way to do it is to have another entity. And I think another entity is a cooperative, a public cooperative. And there's lots of business to do and lots of things I could say about that. But when I've discussed this with people and others around, there's no plan on how to go about doing that. And you described doing public meetings after that. I don't know what you would do with that PSE study with the public. I think there's a better way to go about engaging the public from the aspect of what you're thinking about. It is your job as the commissioners, your public commissioners, give word to the word public. And it's not a culture here, I don't think, to engage the public, as I started saying. It's not with a lot of the PUDs. It's a culture of industry. And so in hiring a new manager, I'm not necessarily saying fire Chris. I think that he's an asset from the aspect of the industry. In your PSE study, the one thing that came out is if you go after Puget Sound Energy, they're going to be nasty. And I think he knows how to deal with that. That's his industry. Who I do think you should hire is a public manager. I don't think you commissioners know how to engage the public. Maybe it wasn't part of your lives as it was with me. It comes easier to me than it does to most people. But a public manager to create and help move what the PSE study taught us forward and put the public back in the PUD and engage the public. And a new manager could handle that, like manager Chris hires his.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for your opportunity. I'm sorry that I took so long, but there it is.
Thank you, Mike.
Is there anybody else online who has got comments? I don't see any hands raised. Is there anybody else in the room who would like to speak?
Doesn't
Okay,
appear to be.
I'll go ahead and close the public comment period. There's another at the end of the meeting. Let's move on. So I believe the new number 5 is the general manager's report. Please proceed, Chris.
Okay. So part of what we want to talk about on the strategic plan, we'll cover in executive session. So that's still to come. In terms of our customer service, right now, the issues we're dealing with largely around our irrigation customers. So those are the ones that come on when it's dry. and we're in the process of repressuring, turn them back on, and then helping them. At the same time, we're dealing with recurrent leak problems up in Grandview. And the reason I bring that up is, number one, it's a customer service issue because you end up with high bills and other parts. The other reason is that it's indicative of a system that is aged to perfection. So, you know, you're looking at an asset that was probably obsolete when we bought it, that is certainly now aged into fairly high failure rates. So just a heads up, you know, from our discussions around rates that there's enormous pressure on the Grandview system with regards to rates. And the problem there is that as a cost recovery organization, as we plow investments back in to replace the aging infrastructure, it's going to have more and more rate pressure. So just so you guys know, that's coming. So that's it currently on the customer service side. In terms of the water resources, there's so much going on right now. Most of it you're aware of. We got a series of meetings coming up in the next 2 weeks that really deal with the plan that the county has put together, the contract they have put together around storage. And it appears that their focus is largely flood management. And that's really, you know, where they're focused. We're going to have a conference call with them today at 2, is that correct? Yeah. And that'll be the first time that officially we've had a chance to react to the study that they put together. And then that study is going to be reviewed at the Water Management Board on the 27th. So kind of more to follow on that, but there's a ton of things around that. We've still been trying to work with the tribes. John has largely led that effort, and that's really slowed down throughout the summer. And I think John's opinion is, speaking for John, that it's availability, that folks are just tied up and it's hard to get on schedules and things like that. The thing that has kind of made that acceptable, if you will, is that the Department of Ecology continues to move the goalpost. So now they're saying that the adjudication won't be filed until spring. In the past, at first they said fall, then they said late winter, then they said early next year, meaning in winter, and now they're saying spring. I think they're actually getting more realistic, and that is something that's more likely, because if you'll recall, they had to hire 9 FTEs. I think 7 of those were attorneys, and it's going to be really hard for them to staff up and handle this. I get that. So that's going to be, you know, something that kind of prolongs the thing. Once the adjudication is filed, we've got 1 year for everybody to be noticed and then file their claim, and then 4 years to get everything together and have the claims before the judge or the magistrate. So just a reminder, that's where we are on the water rights. With regards to the water associations, we
So let me just
sure
chime in there. We will be doing a water loss CLE on the 26th of September in the afternoon. That'll be at the Leopold Hotel. And it's the day before the PUD water workshop that starts on the 27th. Sorry.
Oh, no. We continue to meet with Dave Olson of the he oversees work with all the different water districts. We have explicitly offered help, and he has brought information to us. We asked specifically, are there any wells that are failing, and we're thinking in the neighborhood of Grandview, and it turns out that they're okay. And the question is the Ferndale pumping lowering the aquifer? And it's not clear on what's going on there. The data is just not, it doesn't say one way or the other. So that tells me that likely that's not the issue. Ferndale's just drawing their own aquifer down. It's not, hadn't spread to the adjacent water districts, which is good news. We stand ready to help the adjacent water districts in 2 different ways. One is if they do need emergency water supply, we've got a mechanism in place now where we can go ahead and supply them with trucked water on an emergency basis. So, it's not huge volumes, obviously, but, we're talking about, how do you help them out in a world of hurt without any piped interconnections? The second thing is we have a interlocal agreement with the county. And that's been submitted to them, but staff has not forwarded it to the commission for the county council for consideration yet. And we continue to work with them and follow up on that. What that ILA does is the county is the provider of last resort. And this would allow the county to tap us as technical experts to, step in and take a look at the situation and say, hey, is this financial? Is it operational? Is it hiring? Leadership, what's the issue here? And then it would give us a chance to say, and here's how we would help. And then they could decide to either take us up on that, or the county would be the provider of last resort, and they would step in and do whatever they felt was necessary. As I said, they haven't accepted that ILA yet. That ILA was an update of one that was submitted in the 90s, which also was never ratified by the county. So we're going to continue to work with staff and try and get it before the county council. And I'll just let you know when something happens there. Broadband, I will defer to the broadband update. Clean industry. The thing that I want to highlight there is we are still awaiting a decision from Bonneville on whether they want to sell their 230 system to us. Once they make that decision, if the decision is yes, it's okay to sell and we can negotiate a price that everybody agrees on, then we would have both a 115 and a 230 kV source available in the Cherry Point area, which really is, when you think about electrolyzers and hydrogen generation type companies, that's what they need, is a lot of power. So they need both power and water. We'd be able to supply it. And I think you're kind of in business in Cherry Point then, and that'll help that. Also, should there ever be a large power generation that's sited at Cherry Point that's non-carbon, this would allow it to function. So as soon as we hear from Bonneville, and we do periodically follow up with them, we'll let you know. In fact, we'll have to, because any agreement we entered into would have to be approved by you guys. The community impact analysis discussed during our executive, and then asset management, just kind of to put a bow on that one. What I have found here is that our folks were already doing an asset management program, but they were doing it kind of below the radar and unofficially. And I've helped them surface that. And I can tell you that all of our main asset classes are now in an asset management. I won't call it a database because it's a whole lot more than that, but it's a framework where you think about it. And you're going to see that more and more in budgets. And just as an example with Grandview, you would expect to have some kind of capital reserve that would build, that would offset depreciation, because that's about how much you're going to have to reinvest as the assets age. We're now in a position to do that. The same in our two water operating industrial plants. And the only thing where we don't have a plan put together yet, and it's just because it's financially daunting, is around our big pipes going up Cherry Point. Those are about 60 years old. They don't last forever. And at some point, we're going to have to do something with that. It's going to be very expensive. And, there's that. So along the asset management lines and looping back to where we started on the customer service, we know that we're going to have to talk to our customers individually, our industrial customers individually, bring them up to speed on where we are with supply, but also with rebuilding the infrastructure over time. The reason for that is that we're going to want to have long-term contracts with exit clauses in them, so that when if a customer would decide that they want to exit, they would have to reimburse for the allocated portion of capital that hasn't been depreciated on their contract. I can go into a lot of detail about that, but basic idea is that with very few industrial customers, if one of them leaves and you have to spread the remaining costs among all the others, it drives rates up very, very quickly, and you end up in a death spiral. So we need to restructure our contracts to kind of reflect the reality of that. That also means we need to talk to those customers about what it is we intend to do and find out what their long-term plans are. Because if they in fact have, plans in the next 5 to 10 years to exit the area, we need to know that before we make big investments in Plan 1. So with that, I just at this point would like to entertain any questions. And oh, so what we didn't necessarily talk about. We're in the process of looking for geothermal grants and working with Energy Northwest on that. They believe that in September, the Inflation Reduction Act dollars will flow through Department of Energy, and at that point, they'll be issuing notice of funding opportunities, which are called NOFOs. They'll issue a NOFO or many NOFOs around renewable energy, and then we'll have access to at least compete for those. So I don't have any news for you on that, other than we've got people that are now watching and waiting. We think it's going to be September or so, and you'll see that. We're also looking for grant opportunities for capital asset improvement, and part of it's on the water. That's a relatively small part. The other part is, as we've talked about, there may be an economic line extension that, if you can underwrite the capital, makes some kind of sense, where we could serve a customer that's not currently served at all by a utility and get their carbon off the grid. So it's like Hamlet's soliloquy. So I'll shut up at this point and answer any questions that you guys have.
Questions, please?
I guess I have a comment, and that's just that this need to have conversations with our current industrial customers around restructuring contracts. That's something I've been talking about since I was elected, and we already are spending money on our plant one rebuild. And I think it's a really urgent need to do,
Yeah.
and I know it'll take some time to.
Well, many of the contracts we have to wait till they roll off, but the first big one is rolling off. Well, it has rolled off. We're in the process of renegotiating, working with John and getting all of that built into it.
Okay. And I think even if the contracts are not, nearing the end of their life cycle, I think just beginning those conversations too, because I think we all know that the future of Cherry Point is likely to change a lot over the next few decades, and Plant One is going to have a hopefully 80 to 100-year lifespan. So we got to think really, really long term.
Yep.
That's all. I just wanted to share that reflection. Thanks for the update.
So you're asking Bonneville to purchase 230?
So Bonneville served the Alcoa plant, the Intalco plant. And since the Intalcos announced their shutdown, that essentially idles that facility. So it's a 230 circuit going to a bus and some transformers. And it doesn't serve anything other than Intalco, but it provides a 230 kV loop source right there at Cherry Point. And so we've asked Bonneville so the first thing is, you got to ask, are you willing to sell the facilities? And they have to decide, yeah, we want to sell them or not. And if the answer is or not, that's kind of the end. We can continually ask them, but they need to make that decision. Then if they decide they will sell them, then the question becomes at what price and under what conditions. And then we've got to go through a negotiation process. And so if they say, yes, we're willing to sell, then I would come back to you guys and ask, okay, green light, you want me to go enter negotiations? And then at the end of the negotiations, we would submit to you what our best negotiated deal we think is, and Bonneville would do the same with their leadership. And then both leaderships would have to say, yeah, this looks okay.
How much does something like that cost? Where do we get the money?
I would defer those questions to an executive session
Okay.
because it could be subject to litigation.
Oh, gotcha. And isn't there a gas company going in Alcoa? Did they purchase that?
So Petrogas or Altigas owns the facility. They own the rights to the facility once it's torn down. So Intalco is obligated to tear down the facilities, clean the site. I don't know if they got to go to Greenfield or it's a brownfield. I don't know what their contract is. And then at the end of the day, Altigas retains the property and much of the adjacent property in Cherry Point. They've got more than 1,000 acres. So, the Intalco plant is the last little piece in their big land holding. So we believe that they're looking at eventually developing that and selling it off to other interested third parties as a land developer. I can't imagine they'd want to hold barren land to perpetuity. It doesn't seem like them. I don't see the profit motive there. So I think they want to be developers at some point, county, and we are very interested in some kind of green job producing industry going in there, and hopefully competitors. And so anyway, part of that is you got to have the water infrastructure, the power infrastructure, but then roads, sewers, telecom, railroad, there's all of those infrastructures have to fit together.
And that's at where the Intelco plant is.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's where the 230 goes. And then we've got a water line that runs to and through that property. Runs down to runs all the way down to their the dock. And right now, I guess AltaGas is using that for fire testing down there periodically. And then we get to see their pressure surges when they turn on all their fire hoses.
Well, I think, that's gonna be a much longer conversation someday.
Yes.
A lot there.
And then just the final thing, I just kind of forgot to mention this. I want to do a separate standalone rates meeting at some point. You guys, so would you want me to target August or September? And we just try and pick a date, pick a time. We work with you to get that. It would just be a workshop, a working session. So it would be a single purpose meeting. And we would talk about rates in general. So it's kind of a rates 101, and then our rates in particular. And kind of how we're looking at that, and our cost of service analysis, our COSA that we're doing right now.
I'm excited for this conversation. We've been talking about having it for a while. I'm available in August or September. I have no preference.
Can we just send you some dates offline or after this meeting that would work?
I'll ask Ann to coordinate it,
Okay,
and she'll ping all you guys, and
Okay.
we'll get a date, including John.
Okay.
And then it'll be a publicly noticed meeting. All the normal stuff will apply. And if you want to do it in the evening or afternoon or morning, we're open.
Okay.
In fact, if you want to do it on a weekend.
Okay.
you can do that.
Any more on the general manager's report?
Nope.
Okay, then let's move on to old business and start with the broadband update.
I want to defer to Andrew on that. Andrew, are you here?
Good morning. So I'll start with kind of future broadband funding, what's coming down the pipe, and then I'll back into our currently funded Point Roberts project. So Washington State, as you might have known from, I think, our previous broadband update, is receiving about $1.23 billion in funding, which is really exciting for the state. And it actually puts Washington State in the top 10 when compared to other states and what they've received. And our state broadband director prior to this announcement had estimated anywhere between 700 and 900 million. So to get 1.23 is pretty incredible, and just again shows the need here in Washington State. And when we met with the state broadband office recently, we were reminded that the first tranche of the BEAD funding will be targeting unserved and economically disadvantaged or distressed counties. And as we know, Whatcom County is not considered distressed. So for now, our timeline remains on point with previous broadband updates, where Whatcom County most likely won't see these BEAD allocations or be eligible for these BEAD dollars until 2027. So I wanted to do a quick update on that. If any, this is a rolling process and it's new for everyone. So as any new information comes, I'll continue to hit on this in the broadband updates if there's any pertinent information that's changed. So now back to the Point Roberts project that's been funded. We're in close conversation with the state broadband office and gearing up for developing a scope of work and ultimately a contract that we would then bring to the commission for approval. That would give us the green light to really move forward with the project, as you could imagine. So, but on that front with Point Roberts, I did want to just pause and take a quick note to identify the Whidbey-Tell middle mile project and just remind the commission and the public that the Whidbey-Tell middle mile project, where they've just recently received, I think it's like $11.8 million to connect Whidbey Island to Point Roberts and basically everywhere in between. It's completely separate. It's no way part of the PUD. It's their own project that they pursued themselves. Again, we're in no way involved with Whidbey-Tell's project. So if there's any questions about the Whidbey-Tell middle mile project, we encourage you to contact Whidbey-Tell directly. So that's the broadband update for now. Pretty quick for this week, but I'll kick it back to Chris in case I forgot anything.
I think that was pretty good. Are there any questions on broadband?
Yeah, I would love to get an update on the local utility district model, which we were talking about intensely a year ago. And I think it's not clear to me where we're at with that and what work has been done on that over the last year.
So we have gone ahead and daylighted financing options for that. And part of it was some of the leads that you gave us. Part of it was things that Kitsap has done. And we went ahead and looked at that. So we have the ability to finance an LUD and do that. We understand the process. We've offered for Ravenscrest to go on an LUD and they have declined. They said they would rather wait until they could get state or federal money to cover the costs before they would take it on as part of their homeowners association, essentially. We have not extended the offer to Snowline. I can't remember, there's 5 homeowners associations outside of Glacier. And that's because we think that while it's possible that one of them may say, okay, we will do this, you end up with a free rider problem, where if one of the 5 HOAs says yes, then essentially you're running the middle mile up there. And then after it's there and established, the others could say, okay, me too. Or we could be leasing dark fiber to an ISP who would then go ahead and serve those folks. Not a bad outcome, but the problem is that whoever said yes would foot the whole bill. And so we're kind of on the horns of a dilemma with that. I guess, at this point, we could begin going out and marketing the LUD model as the way to go. I don't think we're going to have either state or federal money of any big magnitude for a couple of years for what Andrew just talked about. In addition, we're trying to get the county to commit some of their EDI funding to broadband. And we're working with Port and Broadband Steering Committee, of course, on how to do that, what projects to target. And the county executive has asked us to look once again at running fiber out to remote locations to establish 5G towers. And we're going to be working with the county on feasibility around that.
Okay, one of the things I'd like to ask about the, and it's not directly related to Whidbey-Tell, but I'm wondering, whenever someone else was able to get money to do a project, or whether those sources of funding are still available to us as well. So I'd like to find out more about the senators. I assume it's a appropriation line item. And it's certainly something we can pursue with our federal delegation. Congressman Larson, Senator Murray, or Senator Cantwell. And I'd like to suggest that it's the kind of thing that the commission could also help make happen, because we all have these different degrees of relationships with these people. And since we're looking at a dry spell of funding, it may be something to consider.
I couldn't hear you at the very beginning, Atul. What would the request be to the congressional delegation?
So, Commissioner Grant, I believe that what Whidbey-Tell got was what's called an appropriation. a line item appropriation. Some people call them earmarks. And it's certainly possible for a public utility to be able to get that kind of an appropriation. So given that we have a dry spell, it may be something for us to consider as well.
My understanding was that the middle mile grant was not an appropriation, but just a standard FCC grant process. So let me check on that before we run off. You may have good information on Whidbey-Tel, but you may have bad information on Whidbey-Tel there.
But I'm completely open to the possibility of having bad information. And I am not just, I don't want our focus here to be just that one statement from me. What I'm saying is that we now know that there's a period of time where we will have limited funding for the expansion of fiber in Whatcom County. For that reason, it's time to go back to the drawing board and identify what potential sources of funding we have, including LUDs, and piece together a new strategy for raising and spending money to expand fiber infrastructure to serve the public in Whatcom County.
One last question. Have we talked to the residents on McGee Road and Blaine, Jamie Douglas and his neighborhood about the LUD model as a possibility?
Yes, we have.
And have they
haven't opined one way or the other. They're still waiting on the proposal from the port. The one that didn't get funded in the latest round covered that area. And now the first proposal taken to the county covered that area, and the county declined that. We're going to be taking another proposal back to the county that will also include McGee Road. And so if that gets declined, and it looks like we just can't serve them this way, then it'd be more, Jamie, do you want to pursue the LUD model? But yes, we've talked to them about it. They're very aware of it, and they would prefer not to pay themselves. They would like somebody else's money to pay for it.
Makes sense. What would be helpful for me at the next meeting is if we could get a little bit more information on your thinking on the LUD model and maybe some different options for moving forward. Do we want to try to publicize this to more communities so that they can decide for themselves if this is a financing model they want to use, or do they want to wait, 4 more years for federal funding? But I know you guys think about this a lot more, this is what you do all day. So I just don't want this to fall off the radar, because I think the LUD model has promise.
Well, and one thing I do want to point out, and this is just for the commissioners to think about, many of the LUDs around here would come where the nearest fiber or the nearest ISP connection would be deep in the heart of an ISP's solely owned territory. And if you insist on an open access model, it may very well be that the close ISP just says no thanks, especially if it's the one we know about. They're going to say no thanks. The one that covers about 3/4 of the county. And so then you're in the process of building a very long middle mile stretch to get back to somebody who would say yes. So, when you look at the LUD model, we might have to look at it a little bit differently than we've looked at our federal and state funded model in terms of open access.
And I think those are trade-offs that I would just love to have it sort of organized in a memo or a PowerPoint presentation where those considerations are sort of laid out for us, and we can start making a choice about what direction would potentially make sense. That would be helpful for me. I don't know if it would be helpful for the other commissioners. Okay.
It would be very helpful to me. I want to repeat again, what we undertook a couple of years ago was a low-hanging fruit, bunch of state money coming approach, which made the amount of trade-offs and planning relatively straightforward. Now it's time to go back and reassess what we want to accomplish in terms of providing broadband infrastructure, look at what we've learned, and then also look at the current funding sources. And let's all remember that the actions that we take have to take particular notice of digital equity. And that was not a part or not a central piece of what we started with, but it is certainly a centerpiece of where we're at today.
So I commit to bringing that presentation back to you guys. I'm not sure if it's the next meeting or the meeting after. It might take a little while to get all of it together, but as you can tell, we've thought through most of this stuff over the last year and a half. And I will tell you, the communities that were really anxious, that were kind of pounding at the door, we have them all fully engaged. So there would be a marketing effort that would be involved at this point, which is not a bad thing. I'm just saying, you know, the problem with the marketing effort is you're never sure where the people are going to say, yeah, pick me, pick me. And wherever that hand goes up is going to have a unique set of physical problems around it. So it's hard to say in advance what model would fit best for each neighborhood.
Well, certainly, Chris, appreciate this conversation, and maybe you can do some thinking on this subject on how to manage that. Maybe it's an annual cycle, maybe it's a 6-month cycle of how we review the landscape, the needs, the resources, and then start a plan. So let's figure that out.
Fair enough.
Okay,
I think that's it for broadband.
I think we also have we have an adjudication update as well.
We really don't have anything new. I think what we have, Steve, Chris covered in the general manager's update.
Right, and maybe some of us received an email from Ecology on the subject, but Chris, you already covered that on timing. And has anybody heard anything else from Robin McPherson regarding coming up to Whatcom County? She met with anybody else at the PUD or
No.
no? Commissioners?
No.
I asked her to sit down for coffee or lunch next time she does come into town. She said she'd reach out to me, but I have not heard. I do know she's going to be here on the 26th of September. I think we're going to see a continuing lull in August. Just summer schedules.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on with the agenda to new business.
I would just say, sorry, when the other one, I did speak with representatives of the agricultural board, and we're hopeful to have an attorney in-person meeting with the federal attorneys assisting the tribe attorneys, Ag Board, ourselves, City of Bellingham, trying to see if we can do that in early fall, but it's going to be a lift, and it's going to be harder when I can't get the tribe attorneys together. But that's just scheduling issue right now. So sometime this fall, I'm hopeful to have a larger introduction group amongst all the lawyers, and then that may lead to a larger staff discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Can we move on to new business now?
Well, I just wanted to, I wanted to be clear about something that you mentioned earlier. So Ecology is now saying spring 24 is when we're gonna file for adjudication. Is that right?
That's what we got yesterday, yeah.
So how soon after that's filed will notices go out to folks?
I think they have 1 year once it's filed to make sure everybody, well, 1 year to get the
You
claims.
know, 1 year, so when they file. That's a good question, because under, I'm gonna get technical for a minute, under starting a lawsuit is 2 elements, filing and then serving the parties. So when they say it started adjudication, arguably, and this is an unanswered question you have to Ecology, do they just mean filing the complaint, if you will, the petition for adjudication with Whatcom County Superior Court? They then have to also serve every person with a potential claim in the county, groundwater exempt well holders, to the PUD, to the tribe, to Bellingham, and everybody in between. So estimating 10,000 plus or minus parties that will have to be served. And if they can't locate them, then they will do a service by publication, which is publishing notice of the petition in the Bellingham Herald. Once those services have occurred, then parties will have a year to respond to and file their claim, initial claim, which is, here is what I believe I have a right to. And there'll be forms that ecology develops or the employers develop, court approves. Then there'll be 3 years after that to file the evidence in support of the claim. Then after that, so 4 years after the spring of 2024, so spring of 2028 sometime, the court will then start the litigation around this. There may be motions brought before that to sort out legal questions. There may be some orders on scheduling processes that lawyers work out and negotiate, or parties do. But the real meat of the litigation of the adjudication and whether or not homeowner X or municipal entity Y has what the scope of their claim, their right is, and the time of their right won't be litigated till sometime after 2028. So you're not going to be through this adjudication till the late 2030s, probably 2040s.
I have so much anxiety over how people are served. And like when that has, so let's say adjudication filed, spring 2024. And then maybe it'll take a couple months to get.
Yeah, it could be serviced by mail if they have good addresses. It
Yeah.
can get a return service. It could be process service. That could be an intern from Western Washington University going out to someone's home to say, John Sitkin, yes, here, you've been served. It could be that they can't find you and they'll do a service by publication.
So a couple other things to think about. Until the adjudication is filed, the county won't have the funds that are made available in the latest legislation to help with going out and doing that outreach. So the funds have two pieces. One is to be sent through Viral One, and that's meant to do additional studies and that kind of work. The other goes directly to the county to help in this notification process. I think that's explicit. So I think there's a general recognition that, and the numbers I've heard are 15,000 exempt wells or more. And so then the question is, how many are out there that they don't know about? And, how many people are drawing water out of the Nooksack or out of the ground without any kind of permit, and how do you notice them? Or do you worry about that? That's all, we've got to go through all that. But there's a recognition that Department of Ecology probably will not be good at identifying the marginal people who need to be served, and that the county would be able to help there. But until it's actually filed, the county can't gear up to do what they're going to do to try and help. So everybody's kind of waiting on ecology to file, and then all of the funding is related to the fiscal year. Since it's going to be so late in the fiscal year, almost the start of the next one, we're going to have to go back to the legislature and say, hey, can we have a legislative fix? And I forget the term, but it essentially moves unallocated funding or unspent funding from one year to the next. And we'd have to ask for that, and it would have to go through the legislative process and get approved. So there's just a whole bunch of things in play right now. A lot of it just depends on when DOE files.
But how they're going to serve the individual homeowner is a question for Robin.
Oh,
Are you sending someone to the doorstep? Are you sending a mail? What happens if the mail's not picked up or delivered the wrong address? Those are questions I don't have an answer for, because that's an ecology process question.
And part of that is why they're having to hire all these people. Set all that stuff up and get it moving.
okay, thank you both.
Okay, can we move on to new business? Let's move on to new business.
Good morning, Commission. It's the standard every once in a while. I think we're on version 14 of an update on our purchasing policy. And so it's pretty straightforward. There's a couple little tweaks I have in there. One thing, I do want to share my screen. Which was not added because I should have added it just to show you what it looks like. but the professional services evaluation form was not included in the packet, and that was my oversight. There's not much there. It's basically when you decide to do a project or go out for a project, you would fill in the evaluation criteria, the different firms that you were looking at, and then score them. And then this is being driven by SAO. And we're coming up on our audit later this year. So we're going back and reviewing. Previously, we had added this to the professional services, and now this is being also added to the architecture, survey, and engineering piece of the purchasing policy. The other two tweaks were concerning purchase orders. And just to clarify, has been some question on purchase orders and credit card purchases. And so what I did is I tried to clarify when a purchase order is actually needed. And then the second part is I increased that purchase order requirement from $1,000 to $2,500. Just, as costs are increasing, $1,000 tends to cover quite a bit. We can always write one for less if some businesses really like them and require them when we do business there. We can always do that, but for our own internal purchasing policy, I raised that to $2,500. Any questions on this?
Any questions?
None for me.
I'll make a motion to approve the revisions to the purchasing policy.
I'll second.
And so there is a motion and a second to approve the revision to the purchasing policy. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Motion passes. I believe that's the only thing we have under new business, Chris?
That's correct. And if there's no questions on that, we can go to the operations report, and I'll kick it over to Brian.
Thank you. Brian?
Morning, Commissioners. As you're probably aware, the operations team is in full-blown plan maintenance and projects mode. So I thought today I would touch on 3 of the projects that we're engaged in currently. And then I'm going to pass this off to Kurt, and he'll talk a little bit about what I'll call plan maintenance or an issue that's going to come before you more and more as we move forward and due to aging infrastructure. So I'll start it off and pass it off to Kurt. But first project I want to discuss is just the solar project, give you an update. As it stands right now, the contractor is going to begin work first part of August. And we've been told by the contractor, it'll only take a couple of weeks to install the panels and the electrical infrastructure to support the panels. So they're anticipating they'll be done with that project August 18th. And so obviously you'll have an opportunity to see the new photovoltaic array on our maintenance building once that project's completed. What they're waiting, the contractor is waiting for right now are the structural permits from the county. So they in the permitting process, and they'll be done as soon as the structural permits are issued. Second project is the Plant One, the lingering Plant One substation project. We have a timeline now from Patalco, the general contractor. They're going to restart work on the substation July 17th. And I believe they estimated it to be about 30 days to complete. I'm saying it's going to be 30 to 60 days complete, given past history on that project. But hopefully by this fall, we'll have a functioning new substation at Plant One. The third project was an unplanned project that came about as a result of a maintenance activity that we do every year. We bring divers in to clean sediment out of our intake, particularly at Water Plant One. Sediment accumulates in the chamber at the bottom of the intake prior to the water from the river entering the wet wells where the pumps are that then pump that water over to our treatment plant. Well, the divers came in this year and found that there's substantially more material, more sediment in that chamber than there have been in previous years. And normally what those divers would do would be get in there, clean that chamber, stir up the material, and then we'd suck it into our system. So we end up with highly turbid water that we then had to treat. And it was also hard on the infrastructure. It was hard on the pumps because you've got this sandy, gritty material you're now sucking through the system. So it was causing wear and tear on the intake pumps as well. So we elected not to do that procedure. And instead, we're going to have the divers pump the material out of that chamber. And they had suggested using sort of a bag system where we could pump that water with material into a bag and filter the material out and then pull that bag away to be deposited. Well, it didn't work. Far too much material, far too much water to pump in. And it was creating sort of a dangerous situation, the pumping process. So we backed off, looked at a number of alternatives for getting that material out of there. And the one we finally settled on was we're going to directionally bore under Ferndale Road, install a pipe we can then use as a pathway for pumping that sediment out of the intake, moving it across the road, and then we'll deposit it in our sedimentation ponds on the west side of the road. And this will be something, once it's in place, we can use it on a continual basis. It'll make it much easier to clean that space going forward. We had briefly considered dumping the material back in the river, but as it turns out, setting logic aside, if you pull sediment out of the river, if you attempt to deposit it back into the river, it's considered a pollutant at that point. So we elected not to try to go that path. This will give us a real good solution for getting that material out of there on an ongoing basis. And with that, I'll stop to see if there's any questions about the 3 projects I mentioned.
So
Mr.
Brian,
Grant.
will we not need to hire the divers then in the future once we do this directional boring project?
No, we'll still need to hire the divers to go down there and stir that material up. Because one of the things is what's happening, we can only surmise that there's just during flashy periods in the river, there's a lot more material moving down, and then it's impacting our, particularly the intake at plant 1. Plant 2 has not been a big issue. But there's a lot of, that real fine material has a lot of clay in it. And once that clay settles in that bottom chamber there in that intake, it solidifies like clay does. And it's very difficult. You can't just suck it out of there. You have to go down and stir it up. Sort of a physical, manual process. So the divers will still go in there.
They actually take the snorkel down there and jam it in and break up the stuff as it's being sucked in. So
Can't imagine.
it's a manual process. And
So but then it allows us to suck us without turning the pumps on. We can suck that material through that new pipe and get it out of there. The feeling is, as the river conditions change, this is going to be an ongoing process.
Mhm.
The other thing I should mention about that, if you're thinking about it, we are going to put that new utilidor in under Ferndale Road as part of the Plant 1 upgrade. But this pipe will be outside of it, so we won't have to tear the pipe out when we put the utilidor in. This pipe will be located outside of that utilidor, so it won't be a wasted capital investment.
Okay, great. Now I've got specific items, but they're kind of,
Commissioner, could I have Kurt weigh in on his the maintenance projects they're dealing with?
sure.
Kurt?
Morning, commissioners. Sorry to throw this off a little bit. This is just a little repair we did here on Trigg Road. It's for it was for an irrigation, sort of an irrigation customer that's treated as an irrigation customer, but they're not really a farmer. But share my screen with you here. And so this is what we had, can you see the pictures?
Yes,
So
Yes.
what we had was the customer called and said that they had some kind of leak out in their field next to the culvert. And what we're looking at here is a galvanized pipe. This is a welded galvanized pipe that was attached to our main line. Let me move something here a little bit. So that had to be removed, and to do that, this is a picture of a meter setter. This basically marks a demarcation point between the PUD's responsibility and the customer's responsibility. And so just to get back into this connection point is the new connection that's on our main 24-inch line that goes under Trigg Road and out past all down Alder Grove out to Cherry Point. This is kind of the conditions that the crew is working on. The contractors see they have some shoring, and there's a lot of moisture down in there that they're dealing with. Another picture of the new connection point, and what we're using now instead of galvanized is HDPE piping, and that's run up connecting to the meter setter. And we have the green wire there. That's a tracer wire. That's something that's become it's common practice to install a tracer wire whenever you're doing new excavation work. But one of the issues that we run into at Grandview specifically is tracer wire basically seems to only been invented in about 2015 out in Grandview, so that it doesn't exist almost anywhere. So whenever we do work out there, it's always a little bit of a challenge. And then this is just a bit of the back work. We're backfilling with gravel to just below previous grade. And then we'll use the existing native soil to just top dress it and bring it back to the existing grade and put it basically back to normal. That repair took 2 days. It was I just got the invoice this morning. It was just a little bit over $13,000 for that repair. And like Brian mentioned, that's something that's going to be probably coming more often. We just discovered yesterday there was another one out by the Praxair facility, which is at the end of Alder Grove Road, and there's actually a meeting going on that started at 9 a.m. this morning between Praxair and PUD and a potential contractor for working on that repair. So this is just some of the things that we're coming across on a daily and weekly. This isn't a daily occurrence, but these are some of the things that we're looking at on a regular basis.
I think to add to what Kurt said is just an indication. We've got a number of these, what I'll call non-industrial irrigation connections, or in some cases connected off our main transmission lines, the ones running up Douglas Road or Alder Grove Road. A number of these connections, the infrastructure is getting old. Those connections were done well before our time here. In most cases, we don't even have as-built. So not exactly sure what the agreements were in place at that time. So the reality is we're going to have to increase our budget to address these connections, on a plan basis, and then respond on a non-plan basis when there are leaks. But we're trying to get ahead of it. So we're going to plan to do a number of these connections each year, try to get ahead of having any kind of an emergency or a leak. So you can be prepared to see that in the budget as we move forward.
okay,
Thanks,
great.
Kurt. Brian, any questions?
Thanks,
I
Commissioners.
just wanted to say thanks, Kurt, for sharing the pictures. It is really helpful to see the photos of the work that you all are doing out in the field.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I might add Kurt and Garrett have really hit the ground running since they've come on board, because a number of these issues have popped up since they've come on board.
So, Brian, Chris, I'd like to follow up next week with the two of you. From a prior life, I have a lot of experience in getting tanks clean. So would love to have a chance to contribute and have that conversation. Sedimentation, getting dunk off the bottom of tanks. I don't know who else you want to have in that discussion, but hey, Chris, if you can suggest some times for next week offline, that'd be great.
Okay.
We can combine it with our weekly check-in too. All right, that's all I have. So let's move on to commissioner reports.
Me first, okay.
I got to go first since you always get stuck going first, Jamie.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say I'm attending WPUDA meetings this week. There's an invitation for a dinner by Energy Northwest in San Miami. I'd like to go to that as well. If there's more than one of us going to that, then I think we should probably mention that to the public, if it's appropriate. So I just wanted to mention those two things.
I plan on going to that also. That's August 23rd. So
Oh, is it
So-
not? Okay, I confused that.
yeah, it's a month away. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Jamie. Okay, that's all I have.
Oh, okay. Well, mine's brief also. I wanted to ask really quick though, is our next meeting going to be really brief, like the previous one? Just sort of an update on.
I thought we were going to do the first meeting as the long one, and the second one is the short one. So yes.
So yes, okay.
Yeah.
And got it.
One action item, we had a bid opening last Friday that it's due before the bid.
So it'll be a little beyond consent
Okay.
agenda, but not.
So any claim, the last time we didn't ask for claims requests from commissioners, so we should probably like it for the entire month. You should probably do that now.
The per
It's-
diem.
Yeah, the per diem claims, that's because we didn't do that last time, so I just wanted to make sure that people weren't just covering the next 2 weeks, that they were covering the month. Like a tool, I'll be attending the WPUDA meetings. I'm going to be doing that on Zoom. I won't be able to go down. I have a WIRA board meeting on the 27th.
Mhm.
That I'll be attending, and then I think Ann and I will be getting together close to the end of the month, is that right, Ann? To talk about Facebook, so we can actually get the ball rolling on getting our page up and going. So, you know, commissioners, if you can take photographs of things that you're doing, send short, you know, couple sentence little blips of kind of things that you're doing. You know, we can also notice meetings and that sort of thing publicly.
Mhm.
That would be really helpful. So, and that's it. Thank you.
And we're also, our intent is to have content from you guys. And then also perhaps maybe some of these photographs, you know, here's stuff
Wonderful.
operations is
Yes.
doing.
Yeah, I love
And,
that.
and people can see what's going on.
An underwater picture of scuba divers.
I haven't seen one of those. That'd be good.
I'll go real quick, just the, since I missed the June 13th meeting, since our last long meeting, I did a tour of the Columbia River Generating Station with many other members of the board of directors of Energy Northwest, and I drove out there with Representative Alex Rammel, and Representative Stephanie Barnard, who serves the Tri-Cities, also went on the tour. So I think it was a really good opportunity to learn about the plant, and also have some good conversations about the future of clean energy and what that looks like, and the possibilities for nuclear to potentially help with integrating renewables, and the challenges with that, especially with cost. That is a big challenge right now with pinning that down. As far as going forward meetings, I have a Energy Northwest Board of Directors meeting on July 26th. And then I also am interested in there's a net zero Northwest meeting in Seattle. They just released a big report called Technical and Economic Pathways to 2050 for decarbonizing the Northwest. So that's on July 17th and it's in Seattle. And I was planning to drive down there with Senator Sharon Shoemake. There's a lot of people convening in the kind of energy and utility world at that meeting. So I would love to have that be a per diem. I think just continuing to have in-person interactions with the people in the Northwest that are leading on decarbonization is helpful for the utility as we're working on a number of initiatives. So those are my 2 per diems looking forward in July. It's good to you too.
Great.
Thanks for the reminder, Jamie. I will be attending PPC meetings in July. There's a July 19th PPC meeting, so. Any further under commissioner comments?
Let's keep moving because your deadline, your time is limited. Yeah.
Yep. So let's move on then. We have a public comment and then an executive session. So is there any public comment?
I don't see anybody's hand raised on the electronic side, and nobody here in the room has their hand up.
Okay, well then let's move on to executive session.
That is going to be on a link that I sent out, and this is not a matter that I necessarily lawyers be attending, so I'll start this on my laptop for you. And then I'll step away
Great.
I'll just long enough to make sure it starts, there's not feedback and things like that, and then I'll step out and you'll come find me.
Great. I'll go ahead and leave this and I'll hit the other link.
Oh, and there'll be nothing coming out of executive session in terms of decisions, and we expect it to be no more than a half hour.
And then after we come back, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
The 50 plus or 50th weekends on Sunday. I always got 70 in the heat hills and that's all.
Are we back on? Okay, we just completed an executive session focused on the general manager evaluation. There was no action taken, and at this time, the meeting is closed. Thank you.